When my son's wife told me, "Your time with him is over," I didn't say a word. I just smiled. A small, trembling smile that barely stayed on my face. Sometimes silence is heavier than anger. That day, my silence held 28 years of love, sacrifices, and memories. I remember standing by the kitchen door, my hands still damp from washing the dishes. The sunlight was slipping through the curtains, but everything around me felt dim. Her words didn't come with shouting or cruelty, just calm certainty, as if she was simply stating a fact that I hadn't accepted yet. I wanted to ask her, how can a mother's time ever be over? But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew what she meant. My son Daniel had always been close to me. He was my first child, my miracle after 3 years of waiting and praying. I used to hold his tiny hand when we crossed the street, afraid that even the wind could hurt him. He'd whisper, "Don't worry, Mama, I'm strong," and I'd laugh because he was only 6, yet already trying to protect me. But life moves forward. Children grow up and love shifts, not away, but around. When Daniel met Grace, I saw the light in his eyes. The kind of light that tells a mother, he's found someone to love more than me. I thought I was ready for that. I truly did. But love tests us in ways we don't expect. The day they got married, I sat in the front row, hands folded, watching him say his vows. I smiled and clapped, even though my heart ached in quiet ways I couldn't name. That's the thing about motherhood. It's filled with both joy and letting go, often at the same time. Years later, after small misunderstandings, quiet distances, and things left unsaid, Grace looked at me across that same kitchen and said those words that ended something inside me. Your time with him is over. No one ever prepares you for that kind of sentence. It doesn't scream. It doesn't cry. It just lands quietly, and everything after feels different. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and nodded. Inside, though, a storm was gathering, not of anger, but of grief. Because I realized that sometimes losing your child doesn't happen through death or distance. Sometimes you lose them while they're still standing right in front of you. And that's where my story begins. The day a mother's heart learned to let go without a goodbye. Daniel was my whole world long before he ever knew it. He came into my life after years of waiting, years of doctor visits, and quiet prayers whispered into the dark. When I first held him, he was so small that I was afraid to breathe too close, in case I scared him. He had a tiny dimple on his left cheek, the same one his father had, and even then I knew this child would be the greatest part of my story. His father, Michael, worked long hours at the factory, and most days, it was just Daniel and me. I'd hum lullabies while cooking, and he'd sit in his little chair near the window, watching the world outside. We didn't have much, but love made our small apartment feel like a home. Every morning before school, he'd come to the kitchen, hair sticking up in all directions, and say, "Mama, can you make the pancakes with the smiley faces?" I'd pretend to sigh, then secretly love the way he grinned when I agreed. Those moments were the little threads that stitched our lives together. When he turned 10, his father passed away after a short illness. Everything changed after that. I remember the night Daniel came into my room, still wearing his pajamas, eyes swollen from crying. He crawled into bed and whispered, "It's just us now, right, Mama?" And I held him tight and said, "Yes, my love, just us." From that night on, we became each other's comfort. I was both mother and father, and he was the reason I kept going. He grew into a kind, thoughtful young man. The kind that helps elderly neighbors carry groceries. The kind that never forgets to call on birthdays. I was proud, so proud, that I must have told everyone in our neighborhood about him. Maybe too often. After high school, Daniel went to university in the city. It was the first time we'd been apart. I pretended to be brave that day at the bus station, waving as he left. But the moment his bus disappeared around the corner, I cried all the way home. For the first few months, he called every evening. We'd talk about his classes, his new friends, even the cafeteria food he couldn't stand. I lived for those calls. But slowly, the calls became shorter. Then, less frequent. And then one day, he told me about her. Her name was Grace. He spoke about her with a kind of lightness in his voice that only young love can create. She was studying nursing, he said. She made him laugh, understood his long silences, and once brought him soup when he caught the flu. I remember feeling happy for him, but also something else. A small, strange ache. It wasn't jealousy, it was fear. Fear that my place in his world was changing, even if it was natural. The first time I met Grace, she came home with Daniel for the holidays. She was polite, quiet, with the kind of confidence that fills a room without noise. She offered to help me in the kitchen, but her hands moved hesitantly around my space, like she wasn't sure what was safe to touch. At dinner, Daniel couldn't stop looking at her. Every time she spoke, he smiled like the rest of the world had faded. I watched him, remembering the little boy who once couldn't eat without my help, now sitting across from me, a man in love. When they left that weekend, I stood at the doorway and said, "Take care, both of you." Grace smiled and nodded. Daniel hugged me tight and whispered, "She makes me happy, Mama." And I whispered back, "That's all I've ever wanted." But after they drove away, the house felt too quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed louder. Months turned into years, and I learned to adjust to his new life. They called when they could, visited when schedules allowed. Each time they came, something had shifted, small things at first. Grace would reorganize the kitchen drawers, saying it would be easier for you. She'd correct Daniel when he told a story wrong. Harmless gestures, I told myself. Yet, I began to sense a distance, an invisible wall that wasn't there before. Daniel still loved me. I could see it in his eyes. But love had grown complicated, divided. When they finally got married, it was a beautiful ceremony. I wore a soft blue dress, the color Daniel always said looked nice on me. Grace looked stunning, glowing like all brides do. I remember standing outside the church afterward, holding my son's arm for a photo. The photographer said, "Smile, mother and son," and I did. But inside, I felt a quiet goodbye beginning. The first few months after the wedding were fine. They lived in the city, and I only visited occasionally. Grace worked long shifts, and Daniel often sounded tired. When I came, I tried to help, cleaning up, cooking meals, folding laundry. It was my way of staying close. But one evening, Grace gently said, "You don't have to do all this, really. We've got it." I smiled and stepped back, but it stung. It's strange how the smallest words can make you feel unnecessary. Still, I told myself, this is how it's supposed to be. Children grow up. They build their own homes, their own families. My job was to let them. But letting go is not as simple as people make it sound. Especially when the home you built starts to feel like a place you're visiting instead of belonging. And slowly, very slowly, I began to feel the quiet edges of that truth pressing in. The first sign of distance is never loud. It begins in the pauses, the moments between words that used to flow so easily. With Daniel, it began with time. He became busier, always promising to call, always meaning to visit, but life had other plans. Grace's work schedule was heavy, his job demanded more hours, and soon, their world began to move in a rhythm I couldn't quite keep up with. I tried to understand. I told myself, he's just building his life. Don't be selfish. But sometimes, even understanding hurts. I remember one Sunday afternoon when I decided to surprise them. I took the early train, carrying a small basket of homemade food, his favorite stew, the one I used to make when he came home tired from school. I had imagined the look on his face, that warm, boyish smile that always melted my heart. When I reached their apartment, Grace opened the door. She was polite, but surprised. "Oh, you didn't tell us you were coming," she said softly, stepping aside. Daniel came out from the bedroom a minute later, his expression a mix of joy and confusion. "Mama, you should have told us. We'd have picked you up." "I didn't want to trouble you," I said. "I just missed you both." He hugged me, and for a moment, everything felt right. But that moment passed quickly. Grace was folding laundry in the living room, and I noticed a small line of discomfort across her face every time I offered to help. So I sat quietly, watching the two of them move around each other in a rhythm I didn't belong to. Their life had its own order now, and I was an extra piece trying not to disturb the pattern. When we finally sat down to eat, Grace smiled politely and took a spoonful. "This is really good," she said. I smiled back. Daniel always loved it growing up. She nodded, then added, "I don't usually cook with so much oil, but it's nice for a change." It wasn't said with malice, just an observation. But it stayed with me. Sometimes it's not what people say, it's what your heart hears in the silence afterward. After lunch, I told them I'd leave that evening, though I had planned to stay the night. "Oh, you don't have to rush," Daniel said, but he didn't insist. Grace smiled faintly. "It's okay, we'll visit you next weekend." I nodded, pretending not to notice that they didn't. Time went on like that. Small visits, brief calls, and the quiet awareness that I was no longer part of Daniel's everyday world. I learned to fill my days with little routines. Gardening, watching the evening news, talking to neighbors who, like me, were learning to live with the quiet. But loneliness has its own sound. The creak of a chair, the tick of a clock, the echo of a voice you wish you could still hear. One evening, Daniel called and said they were expecting their first baby. My heart leapt. I cried on the phone, unable to stop smiling. "I'm going to be a grandmother," I said. He laughed, his voice warm again. "Yes, Mama." Can you believe it? Those months were some of the happiest I'd had in years. I started knitting baby clothes, rearranging the guest room so it could be a nursery for when they visited. I imagined holding the baby, telling stories, singing lullabies again. But when Grace gave birth, things didn't go as I expected. I wasn't called right away. I found out through a message, a simple text with a photo of a tiny face and the words, "She's here. Healthy and beautiful." I cried when I saw her, even through a screen. But something inside me cracked, a quiet pain that no one saw. A few days later, I called and asked when I could visit. Grace said gently, "The doctor suggested limited visits for now. We're still adjusting." I understood. New mothers need rest. I told myself it was fine. 2 weeks later, I went anyway. I couldn't stay away any longer. I brought a small basket, diapers, a soft blanket, and a jar of soup. When I arrived, Daniel looked happy but surprised. Grace seemed tired, pale, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. I offered to help, to cook, to clean, to watch the baby so she could rest. But she said, "It's okay, I've got it." So I sat on the couch, watching as she moved around the baby with quiet precision, every touch careful and certain. She was a good mother. I saw that. But there was no space for me in that picture. Later that evening, while she was feeding the baby, I softly said, "She's beautiful, Grace. She has Daniel's eyes." Grace smiled faintly. "Yes, everyone says that." Then there was silence. When Daniel walked me to the door, I asked if I could come by again next week. He hesitated. "Maybe after things settle a bit more. Grace needs some time." I nodded. "Of course. I understand." But that night, I cried quietly into my pillow, the same pillow I used to press against my chest when Daniel was a baby. Months passed. My visits grew less frequent. My calls sometimes went unanswered. When they did pick up, the baby would be crying in the background and Daniel would say, "I'll call you back, Mama." But often he didn't. I told myself I was overthinking, that life was just busy. But one evening, when I called and Grace answered, she sounded tired, maybe even frustrated. She said, "He's not home yet. I'll tell him you called." I paused, then said softly, "You sound tired. Is everything okay?" She sighed. "I'm fine. It's a lot, you know? I don't have much help." My heart ached. "I could come by and help," I said gently. There was a short silence before she replied, "I think we've got it handled, but thank you." The words were polite, but the distance in them was real. From that day on, something changed. I stopped calling as much. She stopped offering updates. Daniel's voice on the phone sounded different, careful, as if he was balancing between two worlds. Sometimes, love doesn't end in anger. It fades through hesitations, unspoken feelings, and things that could have been said but weren't. Then came the evening that would become the beginning of the end. It was Daniel's birthday. I baked his favorite cake, the one with chocolate and cherries, and took the train to the city, hoping to surprise him again. I hadn't seen him in months. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would feel like old times. Laughter, shared memories, warmth. When I arrived, I knocked and waited. Grace opened the door, baby on her hip. She looked startled. "Oh, hello," she said softly. "Hello, dear," I smiled. I thought I'd come and wish Daniel in person. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's not home yet. He's working late." I nodded and set the cake on the table. "That's all right. I can wait." She didn't argue, but her body language was distant, polite, but uneasy. We sat in silence for a while. The baby babbled softly, and I smiled, trying to bridge the space between us. "She's grown so much," I said. "Yes," Grace replied quietly. After a few moments, she sighed. "You know, I think it's hard for Daniel sometimes. He worries you feel left out." I looked at her surprised. "I don't want to cause any trouble. I just want to be part of his life." She met my eyes. "He's building his own family now. It's not easy to balance everything." The words were calm, but they carried weight. Before Daniel returned, I decided to leave. I didn't want to make things harder. I placed the cake on the counter with a small note. "Happy birthday, my son. I love you." That night, he called. His voice was gentle but uncertain. "Mama, you shouldn't have come all that way. Grace told me you seemed upset." "I wasn't upset," I said. "I just missed you." I know, he said softly. But maybe next time just call first, all right? It was such a simple request. So reasonable. And yet, it felt like a door quietly closing. That was when I began to realize that love, even when it remains, can lose its place. The bond between a mother and son doesn't break. It just finds fewer places to live in. And as much as I tried to hold on, the world around me kept reminding me that maybe, just maybe, my time in his story was gently fading away. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. The kind of day when you don't expect anything to change. The sky was calm, pale with the softness of late spring, and I had just finished watering the plants outside. The house smelled faintly of lavender from the air freshener near the hallway. That morning, I'd received a short message from Daniel. Hey, Mama. Can you come over this weekend? We need to talk. I stared at that message for a long time. The words didn't sound like him. We need to talk. Not I miss you. Not come have lunch. Just those 5 words. Steady, practical, and distant. Still, I told myself not to overthink. Maybe it was about the baby. Maybe they wanted me to help with something. My heart clung to the possibility that this visit would bring us closer again. So I took the early train that Saturday, carrying a small gift, a photo frame with Daniel's childhood picture beside one of his little girl. I'd spent the night before wrapping it carefully. When I arrived, Daniel opened the door. He looked tired, older somehow. But when he saw me, he smiled, that same soft smile that had once been my light. Mama, he said, hugging me. I'm glad you came. Grace was in the kitchen, preparing tea. She turned when I entered, offered a small smile, and said, hello. I smiled back, though my heart was already uneasy. There was something quiet in the air, a kind of waiting. We sat at the table, the 3 of us. The baby was napping in her room, the house unusually still. For a while, we spoke about small things. Daniel's work, Grace's long shifts, how quickly the baby was growing. I tried to sound cheerful, filling the silence with gentle questions. But their eyes kept meeting in that way couples do when they're holding a shared thought they haven't said aloud yet. Finally, Daniel took a deep breath. Mama, he said slowly, there's something we need to talk about. I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. Of course. What is it? He glanced at Grace, who looked down at her cup before speaking. We really appreciate everything you've done for us, she began softly. All the times you've helped, the meals, the visits. You've been so kind. Her words were polite. Too polite. The kind of kindness that carries distance. She continued, but we've been thinking, it might be best if we had a little space for a while. Just as a family. I blinked, not quite understanding. Space. Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle. It's not about you, Mama. It's just, we need time to build our own life, our own rhythm. Grace feels. Grace interrupted softly. I feel that sometimes it's hard for Daniel to find balance. Between us and you. The words were careful, chosen like fragile glass pieces being set on the table. I swallowed hard. I didn't mean to make things difficult. I know, Daniel said quickly. You didn't. You've only ever tried to help. He hesitated, then added quietly, but I think it's time we set some boundaries. Boundaries. The word landed like a small knife wrapped in paper. I looked at him, the boy I'd carried, the man who once promised, Mama, I'll always take care of you. And I said softly, of course, Daniel. I don't want to make things hard. But Grace's eyes met mine, calm, steady, almost kind, and she said the sentence that I would carry for the rest of my life. Your time with him is over. The room fell silent. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to stop. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. But then I saw Daniel's face, pained, uncertain, torn between love and loyalty, and I knew she hadn't said it out of cruelty. She said it because she believed it. She looked at me and added softly, he's not just your son anymore. He's my husband. Our lives are different now. I wanted to speak, to explain that a mother's love doesn't compete. It simply exists. But the words never came. Instead, I just nodded. I turned to Daniel and smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you're trying to protect someone from your own heartbreak. I understand, I said. I really do. He reached for my hand, eyes wet. Mama, please don't take it that way. I don't take it anyway, I replied gently. You don't need to explain. But inside, my chest was heavy. My breath felt shallow. I looked around the kitchen, the table where we once shared meals, the walls that held family photos, the baby's little toys by the chair, and I realized this was no longer my place. After a few quiet moments, I stood up. I should go, I said softly. Daniel stood too. You don't have to rush. I smiled again. It's all right. You both have your lives to live. Grace walked me to the door. She didn't speak, and I didn't look back. Outside, the afternoon sun was fading. The street was quiet, lined with trees swaying gently in the breeze. I stood there for a moment, unsure which way to walk. I'd never felt so lost in a place I thought I knew. On the train ride home, I watched the fields pass by, colors blurring into each other. My reflection in the window looked older, smaller. I thought about all the years, the laughter, the nights spent awake with a feverish child, the birthday cakes, the little notes he used to leave on the fridge. How does all that fit into the word boundaries? I remembered his tiny hand gripping mine the first day of school, how he turned back and said, "Don't go too far, Mama." And now, decades later, I was the one being asked to step away. When I reached home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the quiet, still holding my bag. The wrapped gift, the photo frame, was still inside. I hadn't even given it to him. I took it out and unwrapped it slowly. The two pictures, Daniel as a child and his daughter, stared back at me, smiling from different times. I ran my fingers over the glass and whispered, "Maybe this is how it's meant to be." Tears came, not in sobs, but quietly, like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight fall across the garden. I thought about how motherhood is a long letting go, from the moment they first learn to walk to the day they walk away. The next morning, Daniel called. "Mama," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry. Grace didn't mean it that way." "I know," I said softly. "She just said what needed to be said." "No," he insisted, "she shouldn't have said that. She just feels like..." "Daniel," I interrupted gently, "listen to me. You love her, don't you?" "Yes, of course." "Then take care of her. Take care of your family. That's all I want." There was silence. Then he whispered, "I love you, Mama." "I know you do," I said. "And that's enough." After the call ended, I sat there for a long while, feeling something both painful and peaceful at once. It was as if life had turned a page, and I was reading a chapter one hadn't realized was ending. A week later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a photo, Daniel holding his daughter, both smiling, sunlight behind them. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "Always your son. Always." I pressed the photo against my heart and closed my eyes. Sometimes, love doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Sometimes you let go not because you stop loving, but because you finally understand that love changes shape even when the heart doesn't want it to. That day, something inside me broke. But something else quietly healed too. Because I realized, maybe my time with him was over, but my time loving him never would be. The days after that conversation moved slowly, like soft waves coming in and out without sound. The mornings felt longer, the evenings quieter. For a while, I kept expecting the phone to ring, half hoping, half fearing that it would be Daniel. But life has a way of teaching you to live inside the silence. I started each day the same way, tea by the window, a little radio humming old songs in the background. The garden became my companion. I spent hours trimming the roses, pulling out weeds, talking softly to the plants as if they could listen. Maybe they could. There's comfort in speaking where no one interrupts. Some afternoons, I'd look through old photo albums. I'd see Daniel as a boy, messy hair, wide grin, mud on his shoes, and feel both joy and sorrow in the same breath. It's strange how memories can hold you and free you at the same time. At first, I told no one what Grace had said. It wasn't because I wanted to protect her, it was because I didn't want to hear anyone take my side. I didn't want anger. I just wanted quiet. Anger makes wounds deeper. Silence, sometimes, lets them heal. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel still called, but not as often. When he did, we spoke gently, cautiously, like two people walking on thin ice, afraid of cracking what was left between us. "Hi, Mama. How are you?" "I'm fine, my dear. How's work?" "Tiring but good. The baby's growing fast." "I bet she is." "Grace says hi. Tell her I said hello." Every conversation felt rehearsed, polite, warm, but guarded. I missed the old Daniel, the one who used to tell me about everything, even the small, silly things. Now he was careful, measuring his words, making sure not to say too much or too little. But I didn't blame him. He was doing what he thought was right, building his family, protecting the peace in his home. And I, too, had to learn a new way of loving him, from a distance. One afternoon, I went into town for groceries. It was early autumn, the kind of day when the air smells like dry leaves and comfort. As I passed the park, I saw a young mother pushing her son on a swing. She laughed as he shouted, "Higher, Mama, higher." Something inside me stirred, not jealousy, just a quiet ache. I stood there for a while, watching them. The mother's hair kept blowing into her face, and the boy would laugh every time she brushed it away. I remembered being that mother once. Daniel's laughter, his small hands reaching up for mine. When I finally walked home, the world felt softer, calmer. Maybe love doesn't end when the moments do. Maybe it just lives inside you differently. That night, I wrote in my old journal, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote, "He is happy." That should be enough for me. Love doesn't disappear. It changes its shape, like water taking a new form. And somehow, writing that down made it true. As winter came, the loneliness began to shift. It didn't hurt the same way anymore. The house was still quiet, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. I learned to cook just for myself, to eat slowly, to enjoy the small things, the warmth of soup, the feel of sunlight on the table, the softness of a blanket on cold mornings. Then, one evening, the phone rang. It was Daniel. "Mama." "Hello, my son." There was a pause. Then he said, "Can we come visit this weekend?" My heart skipped. "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Grace wants to bring the baby." She thought it'd be nice. That weekend they came. It had been months since I'd seen them. When the car pulled up, I stood by the door, heart racing like a young girl's. Daniel stepped out first, holding the baby, now chubby and bright-eyed. Grace followed, carrying a small bag. I smiled, trying to keep the tears from showing. Come in, I said. "It's cold outside." Inside, the house smelled of freshly baked bread and cinnamon. I had been cooking all morning. The baby reached for me, tiny fingers curling around my hand. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Hello, my little one." Grace watched quietly. I could see something in her eyes. Not guilt, not pride, but maybe understanding. A realization that I was not an enemy, just a mother learning her new place. We ate lunch together. It wasn't awkward this time. Grace even asked for the recipe of my stew. I showed her how to stir it slowly, how to taste it with the back of the spoon. She smiled. "You make it look easy," she said. I smiled back. "It just takes patience." Most things do. After the meal, Daniel went outside to fix something in the car, and Grace stayed inside with me and the baby. The silence between us felt different now, gentler, almost warm. She looked up from the baby and said softly, "I'm sorry, for what I said." I shook my head. "It's all right. You were protecting your family. I understand that now." She hesitated. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "We all say things when we're afraid of losing what we love." For a moment, she looked at me, really looked, and nodded. Then she said, "I'd like you to be part of her life. She should know her grandmother." Those words brought tears to my eyes. I reached out and touched her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means more than you know." That evening, when they left, Daniel hugged me tightly. "I'll call you soon, Mama," he said. "I know you will," I replied. After they drove away, I stood at the door again, just like I used to. But this time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like peace, the quiet kind that comes after a long storm. I sat by the window with my tea, looking at the stars. For the first time in a long time, didn't feel alone. I felt surrounded by all the love I had given, love that still existed, even if it lived in another home now. In the months that followed, Grace began calling sometimes, just small things. "How do you get stains out of baby clothes? What do you use for colds?" Simple questions, but each one felt like a bridge being built, one plank at a time. I never brought up the past again. I didn't need to. We had both learned something important, that love can't be owned, only shared, and that family isn't about control. It's about grace. And Daniel, he became himself again. When he called now, his voice carried warmth, not tension. "Hi, Mama. Guess what? The baby said, Grandma today." "Did she?" I laughed softly. "She's growing fast." "Yeah," he said. "Grace says she gets her stubbornness from you." "Then she'll be just fine," I replied. We laughed together, the kind of laugh that sounds like healing. I think, in the end, we all learned something. Grace learned that love can expand without losing itself. Daniel learned that he didn't have to choose between the two women he loved most. And I learned that motherhood never truly ends. It just changes shape with time. That's the thing about love. It's not always about holding on. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to open your hands and trust that what's meant for you will find its way back. A few months later, on my birthday, Daniel and Grace came again, this time with a surprise. They handed me a small box wrapped in golden paper. Inside was a silver locket. When I opened it, I found two tiny pictures, one of Daniel, one of his daughter. On the back, engraved in small letters, were the words, "Never over. Always love." I couldn't speak for a moment. I just held it against my chest, my eyes full of tears. Daniel hugged me, whispering, "You'll always be part of us, Mama." And Grace added softly, "Always." In that moment, I knew everything had come full circle. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey, from the day I first held my son to the day I let him go. It wasn't easy, but it was real. It was love, raw, imperfect, unconditional. I realized that maybe Grace's words all those months ago hadn't been the ending I thought they were. Maybe they were just the beginning of a new kind of love, one that didn't need to be proven, only accepted. And I whispered to myself, my time with him isn't over. It's just different now. It's funny how time heals, even when you don't notice it working. It doesn't come like a wave or a miracle. It comes in little ways. In mornings that no longer sting. In evenings that no longer ache. In the laughter of a baby learning your name. These days, when I sit by the window with my tea, the world feels gentler. The same house that once felt too quiet now feels peaceful. The same heart that once felt empty now feels full, not because everything went back to how it was, but because I learned to love what is. Sometimes Daniel calls just to talk. No big reason, no birthday, no holiday. Just to say hello. We talk about his work, the garden, Grace's new recipes. Sometimes, the baby takes the phone and babbles nonsense. And every time I smile. Because that sound, that sweet, chaotic sound, is life continuing. One Sunday afternoon, they came to visit again. Grace helped me make tea while Daniel fixed the old fence outside. The baby ran around the yard, laughing at nothing at all. As I watched them, I realized something simple. This is how healing looks. Not grand apologies or dramatic tears. Just small, ordinary days filled with quiet love. Grace caught me watching her and smiled. "You look happy," she said. "I am," I told her. "I didn't think I would be, but I am." She nodded, and there was no need for more words. Sometimes peace doesn't need to be spoken. It just exists between people who have forgiven each other. After they left that evening, I walked through the garden. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. I thought of the journey, the pain, the pride, the lessons. I thought of how love can wound you and still be the thing that saves you. I sat on the old bench under the tree where Daniel used to play as a child. The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, and I whispered to no one and everyone at once, "Thank you for letting me learn, for letting me love, for letting me grow." If I could speak to anyone listening to this story, maybe another mother, another parent, another heart trying to hold on, I would say this. Sometimes, love changes its shape. Sometimes, the people we raise will love others in ways that leave us standing on the outside for a while. It hurts, yes. It will always hurt a little. But that pain doesn't mean we've lost them. It just means our chapter in their story has turned into something new. Letting go is not giving up. It's giving space. Space for them to live. Space for you to breathe. Space for love to grow in new directions. And if you're patient, truly patient, that love will come back to you. Softer, wiser, fuller. Because the bond between a parent and a child isn't something that ends with a sentence like, "Your time with him is over." No, it never really ends. It changes. It matures. It finds its way home again. That night before bed, I opened the silver locket once more. I touched Daniel's face, then the baby's, smiling through tears that no longer hurt. On the nightstand sat the cup of tea I'd never finished. The air was quiet, the world at peace. I whispered softly, my time with him was never over. It was just becoming something new. And with that, I closed my eyes, feeling not the loneliness of what I'd lost, but the warmth of everything I still had. The house sighed in the silence. Outside, the wind brushed the trees. And somewhere, far away but still close enough to feel, my son's laughter carried through the night. Love doesn't disappear when life changes. It simply learns another way to stay.